Well, thanks for that, Michael. So it's question time. If you'd like to, sorry, Treasurer, not that sort of question time. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and one of the CEDA team will bring a microphone to you. If you could then identify yourself and the organisation you're with, that would be great. While you're all thinking up your really smart questions, I will start with one myself. Michael, you and I have been doing, the EPO Grand Tour. We've been to a couple of places already, and I thought maybe you might like to just reflect on, what you have sort of seen as the key themes that are coming up in the questions across the country, and whether they were what you had expected, and whether there's some things that you were surprised not to be hearing a bit more about.
Well, there certainly were some interesting things coming through, some expected, some unexpected. What has come through, I think, pretty consistently around the country, of course, is a lot of discussion about wages and the risks there. And on the other side of that equation, I suppose, the whole kind of tax debate that's also underway in Australia right now. What has been a bit surprising, however, has been the lack of questions about the housing market. And it's normally something you can guarantee a lot of interest in, given we've all got some sort of exposure to that one way or the other.
Sorry, there's such a large crowd. If I miss you, please make some noise. Well, just on that, one of the things that I think is interesting, and it comes up from time to time, is you showed the chart about where household debt is at and how households are exposed to that, the sensitivity to interest rates, and we can talk a bit more about that outlook as well. But I'm wondering whether you've got some insights that you might be able to share around where households are at in terms of repayments, and how much of a buffer do we think they've got at the moment, or is it a case that as soon as interest rates go up that they're straight into having to cut their own spending?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. You only ever hear one side of the debate, and I've done the same thing. I've just mentioned the figures you hear about how big household debt is, now without really talking about the broader balance sheet story here. And now we can see it pretty clearly on our books, and all these numbers are in the CBA's profit announcement a couple of weeks ago. But what we can see on our books is that most households have kept their repayments constant in dollar terms as interest rates have trended down over the last 4 or 5 years. And because of that, they've just automatically lifted the rate that they're paying off their home loans. So the average borrower is 7 months ahead in their repayment schedule right now. And if we then add in the huge amount of money that's poured into mortgage offset accounts, then what you'll find is the average borrower has well over 30 months worth of protection right now. So there's a fair buffer there against something going wrong. What we're also seeing, of course, is the regulators encouraging the banks to take the sort of steps they need to see as well. So we have, for example, seen a significant reduction in the share of lending that's done at very high loan-to-valuation ratios, significant reduction in the term of lending that's being done as interest-only loans and the like. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes here that are actually reinforcing household balance sheets.
You're a very shy audience today. Here we go at the front, thank you. Oh, sorry, we'll go here first and then we'll come back here. Thanks, Esther.
Oh, sorry.
TNQ from the TAC. I have a quick question on the potential geopolitical threats and what would be the implication overall, and how the Australian economy would be impacted by that, if at all.
Yeah, that's a good question. Economists have had to learn to spell a new word in recent years, geopolitics, something we never really had to worry about before because it never had much of a big impact, but plenty of examples in recent times of just how important some of those issues can be. While they're kind of in the background right now, the reality is this year, those Brexit negotiations will keep going on, plenty of potential for disruption there. There's some important elections coming up in Europe, half-term elections in the US as well, so plenty of potential for surprises coming through from that point. The North Korea-South Korea story is still playing out. There's a long list of these things with the potential to add to that financial market volatility. That's probably going to be a theme for this year, I think.
Dunstan D'Souza from Colin Biggers and Paisley. Just a question on wages growth. We have full employment, we have pressures on inflation, and we've had no wages growth for a long time. Is that going to continue? What's the expectation on wages growth?
Yes, all the sort of things that economists look at says wages growth should be stronger than it actually is, and we keep forecasting that. And that is one of the forecasts that has actually gone wrong over the last year and the year before that, and probably the year before that as well. And I think there's a range of factors working here. So we do have these high levels of job security concerns. And it's not the kind of backdrop where you go knocking on the boss's door asking for a big pay rise as one factor. But the other thing I think is important for Australia is that a lot of the jobs growth we have seen in the last few years has been part-time jobs. Jobs, so unemployment has fallen, but a lot of those workers want to work longer hours. So if you like, there's a bit more excess capacity in the labour market than maybe the headline numbers suggest. And so, for example, we all know the headline unemployment rate's 5.5%, but underemployment is actually more like 8.5%. And it's that kind of gap. I think that's something keeping pressure on wages. Nevertheless, it is becoming a big risk issue, and when you have the governor of your central bank standing up and saying everybody should be asking for a pay rise, it tells you how important that part of the story is becoming in terms of the risks that policymakers see for Australia. It explains why it's become part of the economic debate really in the last couple of months, and why it should be part of the debate, because we endlessly debate about monetary policy, fiscal policy, but if wages is the risk, then wages policy is something that certainly deserves more attention. What can you do? Because it's easy to identify it as a problem, harder to find a solution there, but certainly one thing worth talking about, I think, is what they're proposing in Japan, and that is, well, we'll give you a big cut in company taxes, but only for those companies that actually increase wages and increase their capital spending. So there are certainly sort of options out there that we've never really thought about before when it comes to this part of the story.
Thanks, over here.
George Pappas from Co-Invest. What do you think are the biggest obstacles that we face in Australia to take advantage of that Asian boom, and what would you do to address that situation?
Well, I think the biggest obstacle really is that this is not going to just drop in our laps the way the commodity story did. No, we obviously had the right things at the right time, but Asia didn't have much opportunity other than to come to us to get iron ore and coal and all the rest of it. But all these sort of opportunities being offered by rising Asian incomes are available to everybody around the world, and we're all going to be competing for that. So we kind of need to be, I think, really on the front foot in getting on board that part of the story. When new initiatives like this Belt and Road story come into play, well, we want to be there as well, I think. So in a sense, we kind of know what we need to do. We just need to get on with it.
Are there any more questions? Sorry, just one last question up here at the front, and then...
I'm Michael Clemenger from Cochrane Construction. Michael, a question on the US economy. What's your view of the US economy at the moment, in the future, and its impact on our own economy?
Sure. Well, I mean, the US economy is obviously part of that global story where things are picking up and where it looks like it's going to continue that way. I mean, there's enough momentum there to keep things moving. We're now pouring some fiscal stimulus through company tax cuts and the like into the US economy, and we are starting to see there at least some tentative signs of wages growth picking up, which will obviously feed back in a positive way into the consumer side of things. So we're looking at the next year or two, it looks to be quite a positive story economically for the US. The risk issue there, I think, is, of course, that does mean that US interest rates are going to continue to rise. It's going to feed back into that financial market volatility story that we've already had some examples of this year. But maybe the real question is, what happens in 2 years' time? So that fiscal stimulus has pretty much run its course by then. Potentially US interest rates are higher than they would have been otherwise because of the strength in the US story. So we could be actually looking at some renewed weakness in the US economy once you get beyond 2020. So it's a little way away, but we need to think about these medium-term risks probably just as much as the sort of short-term story as well, I think.
Well, thanks for that, Michael. We'll break for lunch now, and then we'll have the Treasurer Tim Pallas afterwards. But can you join me in thanking Michael for his presentation and insights?